before we punched the record button, you said that you were very strict on time, and I said it's never not a chaotic day with you, but you seem to emphasize that it's very much out the norm by your standards. So if you will, please do elaborate on this chaos that you are currently going through right now.
It's March Madness. That's the best way that I can describe it, to be perfectly honest. Obviously, we've spoken many times about the pop-up, which is on the same date as UFC London, which I saw yesterday is only 30 Samsip days away. So that is rapidly approaching, to say the very least. And then 7 days after that, obviously we've got the TWC London again, which I've mentioned many times. So I have a full filming day tomorrow. We can maybe touch upon that in a second. For the TWC, we've got an advert that we're filming with a script writer, and we've got the actors in the studio. So that's tomorrow. I came back from my friend's fight yesterday in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I saw that.
Lincoln. So I'm trying to get that edit out before the week starts, trying to get my full schedule of content out before the week starts, because this week is when it all starts happening. The marketing, the build-up, the promotion, the production, the absolute everything for the end of March. There are so many directions I'm being pulled in that all I have to do is geek myself up on strong coffee and sit at the laptop, be blessed that I have the opportunity to do all of it, and just crack on. So here we are.
Oh, yeah. Going well then, I imagine. I mean, I wouldn't suspect any otherwise. I know your work ethic. I know what you're capable of. So I'm sure it will come together pretty nicely. But I was going to ask this: so obviously on the actual night of fights, come UFC London, you are filming for Lon and Nathaniel, correct? Or is it one of the two?
In the build-up, possibly
in fight
not
week.
on
I
the night.
clarify actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to be? Have you got seats on the night?
I haven't yet.
No, neither. I was looking at tickets yesterday because I know this is what happened last time with the Tybura versus Aspinall card. The tickets, they didn't sell out well at all, and they shot down in price right up, as you're saying there, right up until fight week. So I'm looking at tickets. I haven't got them yet, so I'm just curious if you were going. That's all I would ask, just quickly.
Usually, what happens is I'm not 100% too sure what the dynamic is. Usually when I am at fight week, usually one of the boys will give me one of their comp tickets. You get 4 complimentary tickets for friends and family. So I've been fortunate enough where the last few times I've had one of those. But because it's in London, I'm just guessing that they would give it to friends and family, which I'm absolutely 100% okay with, by the way. And I'm more than happy to go and watch it at the hotel room, and quite possibly would rather go and watch it at the hotel.
I know your feelings. Yeah.
To be honest. Although I'm super grateful when I get them. But my point is, usually what happens in fight week is, because I'm in so many different places and talking to so many different people, usually one springs up here and there. So I haven't necessarily got one as of yet, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to be there, just because I know how these things sometimes play out. But as it goes,
they just fall into place.
Yeah, I'm not going to be there on fight night. No.
Exciting. Well, I think an interesting question. I kind of just wanted to prompt you, because obviously we don't have. I feel like we've done this so many times now. We don't really have a notes or things we generally want to talk about. Usually we have maybe a rough outline at the very most. But I guess sort of as a spontaneous question, is there anything outside of your work? And this is why the only reason why I use this as an intriguing question is because you are so enveloped in your work. Your work essentially is what you do. It is your everything. And some people might not like that, but you take pride in it, which I appreciate. But is there anything outside of work that has popped up recently? Anything notable on that front? Maybe just life stuff, There's been an obstacle or a positive. The silence is telling.
No, because it's what I always say. My life is my work and my work is my life. So they all sort of go hand in hand. So even if it is a more personal issue, it typically always relates to work anyway, because I know it sounds strange. But the truth of it is, when you're building at the very core a personal brand, everything then becomes your work. Your health becomes your work. Your fitness becomes your work. Your recovery becomes your work. So even more personal issues, if that's going to affect you mentally, or if that's going to subtract your time away from different thought patterns, that again, it comes back to your work. So it all feels like one, if that makes sense. It never
That's
feels
fair. I can relate to that.
feels sort of fragmented. I never feel like, okay, I've got this side of my life where things are going on, and then I have this side of my life where things are going on. Even my friends, right? Even my friends that I spend time
true.
with, they are either in the sport, around the sport, or they're in the media side of things, where they're in photography or film or media in general. So in all honesty, not really. Was there a reason why you asked me that?
No, it just came up. It just spur of the moment. It arrived in my brain somehow.
Yeah, there's no work-life balance. It's life.
It's one. Yeah.
It's one. And I engineered it as such, right? And that isn't a negative either. It's something that I enjoy. And I don't know. I think we hear this phrase a lot, work-life balance. And I've got a few thoughts on that, to be honest.
you got a bone to pick.
I just think it's bollocks. I think you need to understand, what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to create? What do you enjoy? What is conducive to your health? Because
I think
everyone's
it's just balance in general, right? Sorry.
No, you're good. For sure. It is a balance in general. But my point is, what is your goal? What do you enjoy? And what do you know keeps you ticking over? Because at the end of the day, people always talk about this work-life balance. But what if it's just all-encompassing? What if it is just one thing? And at the end of the day, who became great being balanced? No one. Absolutely no one became great being balanced. Do you think that Cristiano Ronaldo got home from training and went, you know what, I'm just going to kick my feet up and not going to think about
That's actually a good point.
my career anymore because work-life balance, I've been to training? No, it's an obsession. To get to the 0.1% of anything, you have to be obsessed, whether you like it or you don't. If you don't like it, you're not going to be great. Let's just accept that and call a spade a spade. You're not going to be great. So you have two options. You can be balanced, sure. You can be successful, but you're never going to stand out and stand alone as someone truly remarkable. I don't believe, personally. You have to be obsessed.
Passion.
And I know it's at the very beginnings of everything I'm trying to do, and what is success and what is great is all completely subjective. And at the truth of it all, you're just trying to master yourself, right? You can't really master anything else. And especially when you're creating a personal brand, you're trying to become the best, most refined version that you can. Manu mente, as best as I can be. It was actually the slogan which was on my secondary school. And although I didn't take anything away from that school, there's always been a small part of me which has resonated to that. So that's just a small rant, but you can't be great if you are not obsessed.
Yeah, that's very true. And obviously we said about balance. I think obviously that's important. Speaking broadly across everything, it's just about, you know, it's not about separating work and life, as you said. It's just more of a broader term. I think it's how it should be coined. And that, particularly for me over the last week, has definitely been a focus on like physical health. And I know that's almost like goes without saying, but for a while now I hadn't been to it's a little thing, but I hadn't been to my Saturday sessions in jiu-jitsu for various reasons. Of course, one, because I got ill before that, because I was traveling. But then I realized I was actually slacking a bit after that and just not going, because I would wake up on a Saturday and it's my day off, right? So I don't work on Saturdays, or I try not to. And I sat there in the morning like, damn, I just don't want to go. And I finally pushed through that sort of sluggishness, and I went and I smashed it. I had like the best session of jiu-jitsu I've had in a while. I hit like, for the jiu-jitsu sort of fanatics out there, I hit a sort of inverted triangle off a scramble on a guy who had like 15 kg on me, and then I dashed him a minute later. And this guy's good. This guy usually gets the better of me in rounds. Big guy. And I tapped it twice. I was like, yes. I felt so fulfilled. I came out of that session just feeling so energized and great. And then my mood was promptly crushed by Chelsea losing later in the evening. But that is that's besides the point. The point is, you know, sort of returning to that original schedule I had and that original sort of formula of training twice a week, you know, and really trying to stick to it now. You just forget how effective it is at just raising those endorphins and just boosting the mood. And I just felt great afterwards. And it is just a little thing and it's nothing crazy, but I think sometimes it's important to highlight those micro details in a lot of ways. It just has such a huge impact. So I don't know, just something that stuck out to me this week on a non-working front, let's say.
I disagree massively on two fronts. First of all,
interesting,
I wouldn't say it's a little thing. And second of all, I wouldn't say it's not on a working front. And I'll explain why. We always talk about health. People love to flipping hammer the point about mental health these days. Oh my goodness, that conversation has played out. The world has overcorrected on mental health. It truly has. It went from no conversation, which wasn't good, to only every conversation is now about that, which also isn't good. The middle ground is always the sweet spot. Always.
There's actually I just really wanted to just jump in on that. Sorry, I feel like I have to. I feel like that's actually an interesting point because I do kind of agree. And actually, like I'm sort of winding down my therapy sessions. I don't have, again, I won't get too deep into it or anything, but as I'm sort of winding down, I sort of collaboratively made an agreement with my therapist to sort of try not to over therapize almost. So I've reduced the amount of notes I'm taking and stuff like that to sort of strip down and get used to this newer version of myself where I'm not over analyzing everything. I'm just comfortable with the decisions I'm making and I know how to approach any problems without, you know, trying to figure out every little detail what I should and shouldn't do, because that's the overcorrection side of it. And maybe not on a social level and a discussion level, as you were saying, but I think the same sort of principle applies.
It's a very good point, right? Because like you said, what everyone can have a tendency to do is overcorrect and then go to one extreme. But the truth of it is the middle ground is the balance and is the sweet spot. You want the tools that the therapist will help give you. You want the tools and the infrastructure to help make better, meticulous decisions, but you don't want to overanalyze, and you also want to apply it to the fact that it's life and it's continually fluid and things will always change and you can't always overanalyze things. So yeah, you're 100% right on that. But coming back to my original point is, firstly, I think that, like I said, the conversation is way overcorrected into mental health. I think it's the middle. But what people don't really speak about enough is they had the whole wave of physical health, which is still here, and mental health, sure. But no one really speaks about how health is a three-pronged attack of basically 33% recurring on each thing: physical, mental, and social. And you have to be ticking the boxes of all of it. So I actually wouldn't say it's a small thing, no, because if you're neglecting your physical health, which you were for a little bit, you're neglecting a third of your health. Not your physical health, your health in general. So now the balance of the triangle is completely out of whack. It's like when you're trying to create a fire, you need the three things for it to survive. You can't have your mental health survive if your physical health isn't surviving and your social health isn't surviving. So it's actually a really big thing. And second of all, you said not work related. It's tremendously work related. It couldn't be more work related.
I suppose it is, yes.
It's incredibly so. And this is what I mean about personal brand. You have your name on your YouTube channel. So you couldn't be more of a personal brand. And if you are not your best version of yourself, then your personal brand is not the best version of itself. And your business in turn is not the best version of itself. You are not performing as good as you can be. So whilst on a surface level, it looks like writing scripts and getting better metrics on YouTube, no, it also below the surface is going to jiu-jitsu, doing resistance training, eating healthier, having your mind right, recovering better, and then in turn, your work being exponentially better over time. So I think it's good that you obviously picked up the habit, because I wrote a post this week. I think what people forget so often is that habits can take years to build. And the weird thing about them, and I know this from first-hand experience, I went from never going to the gym when I was young teens and hated the way I looked, to then started going slowly, and then I got obsessed, and then I would go every day, and then I became a personal trainer. At one point I was going twice a day, and then boom, I'm 22, 23. I hate my job. It's very physical, and I haven't been to the gym in a year. And I identified as someone that was always fit and in shape and healthy. And my identity was completely misaligned with the reality. So I'd built up this habit, which was just second nature to me. And then it got stripped back to zero. And then it took me the best part of 3 years to rebuild it to a position now where I do a 10, 15-minute workout every day, which isn't even that crazy of an amount. But it took me 3 years to develop from that point. From the first step being, okay, I'll enter a gym which is on my way back home from work, and I'll do 1 set of tricep pull downs. 1 set, 10 reps. I'd walk in the gym, 10 reps, walk out the gym is better than nothing. That was 3 years ago. And I've only just got to the point again, just where I'm now doing 10, 15 minutes every day. So the reason I say that, coming back to your original point, is people overlook how long it can take to integrate habits. And also they forget, I'm ranting, I'll finish here.
No, you're right.
Also they forget that it's a continuous journey. If you've tried to get in shape, or you've tried to maintain your health by tracking your calories, let's say, and you've done that for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then you drop off and you don't do it again, well, you've quit the journey. So yes, you have failed. You cannot fail if you do not stop trying. And you can continue trying, but you just minimize what you're actually doing. So people will say, oh, it's really difficult, or it was too long. Okay, tracking your calories every single day, every single thing you eat. How about tracking one thing you eat, or one meal, or one packet of crisps, or just writing it down in a book, making the commitment so minuscule that you create the tiniest foundation and then build upon it. Because everyone always looks to the most extreme variety of something. Tracking every day, going to the gym every day, getting in infinite workouts. They look at all of that. If it's content creators, they look at Guru doing a stream every day, earning loads of money, hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And they go completely to that side. They don't achieve that within a small time frame. And then they say, right, okay, I can't do it, or I give up. But they don't actually continue the journey. If you just continue the journey, make the commitment a lot smaller and build off it, you can actually create a foundation. But no one wants to do it for long enough. No one wants to do it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 10. It's not exciting. It's not fun. It's not sexy. And the biggest thing, everyone talks about attention span in today's market. No, it isn't attention span. It's the fact that people cannot accept delayed gratification in anything in today's market for the most part. They just can't. They cannot accept delayed gratification. That's why people don't really like getting in shape, or they don't want to get in shape. That's why people can't commit to creating content when they say they want to make a personal brand. It's like it in everything. Delayed gratification is, I believe, the real crux of the issue. People want instant because we're so used to instant noodles, instant food, instant pornography, instant dopamine, instant everything in today's market. And we don't get instant results in this. And everything worth having takes 10 years. Whether you're going to be a fighter, a footballer, a content creator, someone in business, whatever it is, it takes 10 years before you do anything small time and make it remarkable. That's my rant over.
Yeah. I mean, you actually sort of gave my segue away there, because that line of thinking, doesn't apply any greater than that of the professional fighter. I think there's a reason only the greatest become champions. It's because they are willing to go through those sacrifices and put in those long hours and grueling hard rounds more than anyone else, because they know that there is no such thing within MMA as instant gratification. And I think one man who is on that path, very much so, fighting on last night's card, and on a night that was full of finishes and, was poised to be probably one of the greatest fight nights we've ever seen up until the main event. One man stood out to me, and that was one of the very few fighting nerds. Not very few, there's very many of them now. John Silver, doing what John Silver does. I mean, he is a problem, if you ask me. I mean, I can't remember the name of the guy he knocked out. Maybe that's a bad thing. That one. I'm not going to try and pronounce that again. But yeah, John Silver, that two-piece combination, that left hand straight down the pipe, phenomenal. Highlight of the night for me in one full of them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got all amped up
No.
and tired, ranting.
No, because I completely agree. I mean, I'll quickly just jump back on that because you say, we talked about attention span. I think we've debated back and forth on that quite a few times here before, and my opinions towards that, and you've definitely sort of shifted my view on it as well. But I think framing it as, everyone expecting instant gratification or wanting instant gratification, that's a much more approachable way to see it. I think, in my view, anyway. I completely agree with you there, 100%.
Everything in today's market, the internet created a lot of positives. Of course, like anything, there's positives and there's drawbacks. And one of the positives is there's less friction to everything, less friction to information, less friction to getting a flipping hard drive delivered to your house the very next day. So everything's just become so frictionless in today's market that as soon as we encounter friction, hold up, this isn't what I'm used to. This is not what I'm used to. I'm used to going on Netflix and getting my favorite series and going on Amazon and being able to deliver my clothes the next day and being able to get flipping next day delivery on everything and takeaway food straight to my house in 40 minutes. So as soon as you tell someone, oh, okay, actually don't really do anything remarkable for 10 years and then you can reap the rewards, I don't like the sound of that. And I really don't like the sound of that. And even, it was funny, every conversation I'd ever listened to, whether it was on podcasts, whether it was people anecdotally that I was speaking to, whether it was friends that had successful businesses, whatever it was, I cannot tell you how strange it was. It was almost as if they'd all had this prearranged conversation where they were going to say, right, remember to tell him, takes 10 years, which obviously wasn't the case. But every angle I'd look at in life for different bits of information and different bits of advice and inspiration, and listening to people on things like Diary of the CEO, listening to hundreds of CEOs and talking about their journey, you realize nothing really happens until it hits 10 years. Nothing. And then I started realizing that when you extrapolate that, it's the same with everything. Like I said, fighting is a great example, right? Lonnie's a fantastic example, more viscerally for us. I come back from Macau and then I started thinking about it because he started when he was 14. It's what
people don't get.
That. Yeah, he started a bit younger.
I said this on my stream. I mean, just on a similar note, is that I hate, it's never going to change. The MMA fan base is never going to change. They are one of the most vitriolic group of people online, I've ever seen. And it really gets on my nerves when, a lot of fans who wouldn't even consider themselves casual, they consider themselves avid watchers of the sport, will be the first to slag off any fighter as being awful or shit or just not very good who's fighting in the UFC. This is what people actually don't get. These guys are training, as I said, 10 plus years of their life, and most of them will never even get to the UFC. Being in that company is a monumental achievement that I feel like so few people who watch this sport actually comprehend and understand. I think the only way you can really do that is probably the best level to do it is to go to a gym and just watch and just understand that level these guys are at. I mean, I've said this before, how many, two fighters, right, at GBTT are fighting in the UFC? That's Lon and Nath. That's it. Out of how many, I don't know. And that's not a knock on the gym. It just shows you the competition that is there and how difficult it is to even just get to the UFC, let alone be a champion. And it does grind my gears a bit when people sort of tarnish that or undermine that achievement.
I'm at a point personally where if it's MMA, if it's football, if it's business, whatever it is, you always have to understand that you don't hear these things from people that are closer to the situation in whatever capacity, right? If you're too many degrees of separation away, you can't comprehend. You can't. And it's not their fault. It's not that they're necessarily even not being empathetic or they can't really understand the gravitas of the situation. They're just too many degrees of separation away. A man sitting in the stands at Stamford Bridge giving his 2 cents on Chelsea cannot physically physically understand the level of athlete that they are talking about. They cannot physically understand that this is the biggest sport, the biggest business in the world with the most competition. They can't understand the level of the operating systems that these people are on. They just cannot. It's not their fault. They're just too many degrees of separation away from it. So you say the best way to see it is being in the gym. I would agree with that. I would also say the best way to understand that is if you obviously know people in the sport, but then it goes another level, right? So I'm in a gym yesterday. I'm in a sports center in Lincoln, walking out with one of my family friends and Lon, funnily enough. And that's when you feel it. When you're warming up in the gymnasium in the back on some padded mats and you're going out into a cage in the middle of nowhere and the crowd's not that full up, but the lights are still bright and the smoke's still going and you're feeling the emotions and people are G'ing the person on before they walk out. It's only when you really see it at every degree. But if you're so far removed from that, you're just never going to have a pulse on it. So I never hold it against these people. It's just more interesting when you're more immersed because you get to feel the different levels. You get to go to Doncaster and go to a strip club and your mate has to pull out because he's throwing up before he walks out and he can't physically stand up and whatnot. And then you see your other mate's head get bashed in. And then the next week you're in China and you're walking out into a UFC crowd. It is insane. But coming back to your point, John Silver fights like he's just trying to create TikTok edits at this point.
He does. I almost wish the ref just stopped it when he hit that knockdown because it would have been a highlight reel for the ages. It almost annoys me. I mean, I get that they're doing their job and, you know, to his credit, it did look like maybe he could survive a couple of shots, but you almost just want it to be over then so we could get that highlight reel finish and it be fully clean. But he has that swagger about him. And I think that just goes for a lot of the fighting nerds. They just know the game. They know it perfectly. I think I don't want to say it's like a generational thing, but you see with, I don't know, not generational, but the new wave of fighters who are entering the UFC now and really hitting their stride. They know the content game because they've seen it done before them. So they know how to do it all. Maybe not all of them to varying degrees, but John Silver is definitely one of them. I can't lie. You're shaking your head as if to say no. Are you saying he's a one of one?
I'm saying I get where you're coming from. I just don't think that's the case. Being very first-hand in that sort of side of things, that is not the case. It may look like that's the case because there are more people, right? So we live in a world where there's more content and there's more people. So the percentages of people creating content and understanding the game may be slightly higher. I don't think is any better than, I've got no statistics to back this up. I don't think it's any better than sort of 10, 15 years ago because honestly, I'm saying this dead serious. Honestly, 80%, 90% of the people in the UFC, they don't really either understand
That's true.
or they don't have the want or the resources. If we look at someone like Brendan Allen, right? Fantastic example. Co-main spot, top 10 ranked guy, middleweight division, only a couple of fights away from very, very big names, very big fights, potentially title shots. Go on his Instagram. Let me know how he's doing. You know, he doesn't, is my point. No podcast, no content, no structure. He says that he's just the type of person that he's not into all of that. He just wants to fight. And I get it, but also you need to get it. That's not doing you any favors. Now, I understand that you're a fighter first, and if you don't fight well, you're never going to be able to create much on the back end of that. That's actually an argument in its own sake. But you also need to understand this isn't like other sports. You can't just go out and be a footballer, score 3 goals on a weekend and everything's taken care of you. No, you're a separate entity to the organization. You have to promote
independent contractor is the term.
Independent contractor. You have to promote yourself. You have to leverage yourself. Someone that's done that tremendously well recently, I would say Joaquin Buckley, and also the fighting
good
nerds.
shout.
So they know the game very well. They're very smart, but I wouldn't say that's the most part of the UFC roster. I'm not trying to be combative.
I agree. I actually agree with that. It's obviously, I just think the ones who are trying to go down that route are just much better at it. That's probably a better way of saying it. And John Silver's definitely one of them. But I think at the bottom line, what it comes down to is, can you knock people out and look damn good while doing it? And he can absolutely do that. You know, Alex Pereira is a good example of that. He's not a guy I would say, as much as he has a good media team around him and they've actually done a very good job of sort of building him up in terms of a content side of things. As an individual, personality-wise, he's not particularly engaging or exciting. I don't think he doesn't say a lot. I get that now they've built that as part of his brand for sure. But if we're talking words on the mic, he's not known for that. Fundamentally, he's about beating the shit out of people, and that's the driving force behind his brand. And that is the bottom line, I think, for most people. And John Silver definitely ticks that box. I think he's very much on the horizon of a title shot. You know, the way he's going. Has he finished every single person he's faced in the UFC now? I believe he has, right? I mean, that says something. I mean, I heard a lot of rumors, and actually not even rumors. It was his call out, and Bryce Mitchell was the man to respond. That is a fight I would absolutely love to see, mainly because I like to see Bryce Mitchell get starched again. But also, I think it's a fun fight, an intriguing one, and a good test for him, a proper grappler. Because people don't understand, Bryce Mitchell, for all of his questionable opinions and views, you know, he had some good success against Ilia Topuria in the first round when they fought. Took him down and held him down and did some good work before, obviously, he did eventually get finished. But people are sleeping on his grappling ability, and I think that is a perfect challenge, ranking and skill set wise, for a man like John Silver.
They're so loose. They're so loose. They're so present. They're so charismatic. But above all else, you're right, they're so talented. It comes down to, can you go in the cage and put on good performances? Because on the flip side, you have someone like Colby Covington, who isn't blessed on the mic, and he's not that blessed in the cage. Yes, he's talented. Yes, he's done some good things, but he's not exciting in the cage to a certain extent, you could argue. To a certain extent. Still a phenomenally good fighter. I'm not saying that's not the case. But can you go in the cage and knock people out? Because this is the thing, right? You have to understand who you are at the end of the day. Who you are. You said Alex Pereira, good person to bring up. We're hitting the marketing side tangents today, but flip it, let's go. It's a great person to bring up because sometimes people hear content, brand, leverage, all of these different words, and they think that you have to go out there and be a Colby Covington and sell yourself to the devil and try and get a few views. No, you have to be authentic, turned up to 10. You have to be yourself.
Yes.
Just turn up. The volume just turn up. That's all it is. I say this to anyone that I know on a sort of personal level. Lon's a good example, right? So Alex Pereira is just himself turned up to 10. Yes, he doesn't say a lot on the mic, but what does he do? He performs incredibly in the cage, and then he just turns the other things up a little bit. He is still authentic, but he wears the get up with the tribal masks. He does the walkout. He does the...
It's the aura. It's the aura. I hate to use that word, but it is the aura.
It's true, right? It's true. And he's still being authentic, but he's just turning the volume up slightly. That's all it is. If it was Lon... I wouldn't say to him, Lon, I think it's a good idea that you just go on the mic and start chatting absolute breeze to people in the division, because that isn't him. But what is him is exciting performances and then being quite humble on the mic, but still giving a name. And then outside of that, we can just amp his brand up to 10. We can just amp it up to 10. So what does that look like? It looks like, okay, leaning more into the fashion things that he likes and the music that he likes and the travel thing and the look and the brand and the sort of Chinese F-boy vibes that he gives off on live streams. Like, lean into it. Lean into it. He hates it when I say that, but it's true.
You say it, I see it.
It's true.
Yeah,
I've been on his live streams. He's just pouting and he's like, oh, Lauren, thanks for the like.
Pretty boy,
right?
Yeah.
You've got to lean into it.
No, he is.
You see, it's the same with Nath as well. And I speak about these two just because obviously I know them a lot closer than I know anyone else really in the organization. So I can use them as good examples. But again, Nath has always been authentic, but he understands that just with his branding, he's just got to turn it up a bit. You just have to turn it up to 10. It's still you, but you have to turn it up. Like, you look at content creators, people say, do they really speak like that in real life? Or are they really like that in real life? It's not that it isn't them. They're just cranked up. you know?
Yeah,
You're in a
completely.
quiet room. You're in a busy room, sorry, you know? You've walked into a party and you're in a busy room and no one's going to look at you or listen to you or care about you unless you just turn up the volume a little bit.
Yeah.
Authentically.
I'm trying to think of I'm trying to think of a good segue with the word authentically on who else was gracing that card, because there were so many finishes off the dome. I can't think of any off the top of my head, weirdly. I don't know. I mean, I will say, actually, if we're talking from someone who is definitely authentic, Anthony Hernandez put on a grappling clinic. Again, I mean, when we talked about Brendan Allen, we touched on him just slacking. Slacking is harsh. Just lacking is actually the better word to use. Anthony Hernandez had too much of him, too much for him. He really did. I mean, that guy, the commentators, Felder and Bisping, really picked up on it, and it's a perfect way to describe that fight and his career, really. He just finds a way to win. He's outmatched, outgunned, and he looks that way going in. But he just wins. He wins and he looks good while doing it. I thought some of the grappling was excellent. I would have liked to see a little bit more submission threat, maybe. There was definitely some opportunity for some chokes, and the ones he did go for were probably a little bit premature, and he jumped the gun on them. But it's just the pace. It was almost unsettling. Very impressive, and I don't really know where he goes from here in terms of a potential fight, because the welterweight division is just... not even the welterweight division, the middleweight division, rather, is just... I mean, there's a lot of names in there, but you sound like you've got one.
I got a couple. I am a massive Anthony Hernandez fan.
As am I.
Really am. I say this passionately. When I first got into the sport, obviously that was around about the time that he submitted Rodolfo Vieira, and I didn't really understand.
Yeah, what a submission that is.
I didn't really understand the gravity of that because I was new and I didn't really know who Vieira was in the jiu-jitsu world, and I didn't really know who this fella was. But as I just continued to watch him, you can say whatever you like about him, but the one thing I'll say about Anthony Hernandez is I would put him in the top 5 in the UFC for actually utilizing mixed martial arts. Tell me I'm wrong.
Absolutely. Oh my God. The way he was just chaining together that 1-2 and then instantly dip under for that single or double leg, actually mixing it up so well. He was mobile as well, because I think you could tell he's confident with his hands. It's not like he was trying to resort to a grappling approach because he thought he was outgunned. I think it was far from it. He just knew what he was best at and took advantage of it, because he was getting that takedown really at will, and he did so well at keeping Brendan there through various means. And yeah, he thoroughly impressed me. But one fight I feel like I just have to mention, and I can't believe I didn't.
Touch on that fluffy one
to mind.
Before
Sorry, yeah, shoot, go.
Because my passion project.
It's unrivaled.
Come on, I need to still get into it, because honestly, I was impressed again, because he goes on the mic. Sorry to cut you off, but I had to give him his segment. He goes on the mic and says that he just finished antibiotics yesterday.
Crazy.
That's insane. And for anyone listening that thinks, what does that even mean? Antibiotics is basically your body just fighting off an illness. So your immune system's just running to the ground. You can't really train that well. You can't recover that well. And also your gas tank is just absolutely shot. If anyone's even just hit pads, when you have a bad flu or cold and then come back and hit pads for the first time and you just are completely gassed on the first round, it's like that. But he's just fighting in the top 10. Brendan Allen keeps shooting himself in the foot with his decision making. He's phenomenally talented. He just picks the wrong decisions in the fight. And I understand that, not to a fighting at the top 10 level of the UFC, but I understand in sport where you're capable of certain things and you just, for whatever reason, you're not present enough. You're not present and your decision making isn't clear and concise enough. And he just keeps shooting himself in the foot with that, because he's talented enough to beat anyone. But coming back to Hernandez, you're so right. It's that relentless pressure. It's the chain wrestling that he does so well. I'm going to call him middleweight Marab. That's probably the best way that I could possibly describe him. He tops the record now for the most takedowns in middleweight history, which is insane in of itself. And second to that, you touched upon it there. He just does what he's good at. He knows what he's good at, and he does it. And that sounds obvious. It sounds obvious, but it's not. And the reason that's not obvious is because you take someone like Brendan Allen, he doesn't do that. He actually doesn't. He had the advantage on the feet from a kicking distance, but he didn't do that. He engaged in the grappling. He didn't disengage. He was still chasing submissions. He gave up positions as well on the ground. And he didn't lean into what he's good at. And he's done that many times. And he spoke about that personally as well, even against Imavov. Anthony Hernandez, complete opposite, does lean into that. And one thing that I will say before we move on that he does so well is, yes, he has melting cardio. Yes, he has relentless pressure. Yes, he mixes his strikes with his different levels, and he's grimy and he's grinding. He's putting your forehead on your throat and he's elbowing you and he's completely beating you up. But he's just always breaking down your base. If you go and watch the wrestling exchanges, the cage war exchanges, he's constantly just wrist riding, constantly picking ankles and just breaking you down. So you're constantly having to build a base, build back up, and then he strips it down again. And then you stand up and then he elbows you and he takes you down again. And you just get put in this washing machine-like cycle of just relentless pressure. And there are just not many people that can keep up with him. And he may not be the slickest on the feet. He may not be the quickest or the most athletic, but my goodness, he understands MMA and he understands how to get his game off. And I would like to see him next against A, Paulo Costa, B, this is a bit of a crazy one, but tell me I'm wrong, a Sean Strickland.
Not crazy at all.
Or
Not
C,
crazy at all.
a bit harsh, bearing in mind that he's coming off a wing off an unranked guy, but this is how the division's mapped out at the moment. A Jared Cannonier.
Oh, yeah, I like that. I like all of those fights. For me, it's just a case of ranking wise, who deserves what. I think that's really the conundrum there, because I think all of those fights are entertaining. I think stylistically, Anthony Hernandez, he will take someone to his level. He'll take someone where he wants the fight to go. So I think innately, whoever he matches up against, if he is successful with his game plan, the fight is going to be pretty entertaining. So I like all of those. Strickland one sounds fun. Again, it might be a little bit harsh considering where Sean is in the rankings, maybe a little bit just out of reach. But I definitely like the sound of any of those. Particularly the Cannonier fight sounds good. I think that's a good matchup for both men. But the one I did actually wanted to touch on earlier, and I can't believe I didn't say it first, was one man who you've had a very loose interaction with, I believe, unless it was the other brother, was Javid Basharat being on the end of a brutal knockout, which showed shades, if we're talking about the finish, of Usman versus Masvidal. And if we're talking about his response lifeless on the mat, also Kamaru Usman against Leon Edwards when he was knocked out cold with that head kick. Eyes wide open, staring into space. Did not expect that. I know Ricky Simone's got power and he's been on a bit of a losing run recently, which I suppose adds to all the more surprise. Yeah, I mean, knocking out Javid Basharat, that is an absolute statement. Bomb of a right hand. Actually, it was a 1-2, wasn't it? The jab spun the jaw and then primed it up for the right hand, which landed flush. That set the tone for the night, if we're being honest.
Can't remember if it was a jab or sort of a bit of a loose left hook, a bit
something like that. Yeah, it set the chin up.
A bit like John Silver. And the one thing I always hear Trevor Whitman say about getting a knockout shot, I've said it before, is getting the angle for the punch so that the chin is going on a 45 degree across the shoulder. And if you can get a punch where the right hand or the left hand is landing on the chin so that the neck is going this way, your chances of a knockout increase exponentially. And that is what he did perfectly, because let's call it as it is, Ricky Simon was having troubles. And to be honest, I was watching that first round and I was thinking, I'll be real, I was thinking, oh, he's really dropped off in this division. He's just going to become the guy that was once in the rankings and is a solid fighter now, but he's going to struggle to climb back up. He looked a little bit lost on the feet. He looked a little bit, not laboured as in slow, but just couldn't quite find his rhythm, couldn't quite find his tempo. And
tentative is the word I would use.
Yeah, and that's also down to Basharat, right? He's constantly changing stances. He's giving different looks, different exits. He's quite sharp on the feet. So it's a two-way tango. But then as I say that, he sets up the most brutal knockout, one of the knockouts of the year, 100%. And again, that's the opportunity that you get when you show the wrestling early, even if you don't get the takedown, even if You don't try and complete the takedown. You just get to the hips or show the level change or show the feint or get your entry in. People, even if their hands are not even coming for down blocks or digging underhooks, their mind is slightly there. And that's all it takes is that 0.1%. And then that's when the jab lands or the left hook lands. And then that freezes him. And then, oh my goodness, that right hand was brutal.
It really is the equalizer, isn't it? The power is the equalizer. I think that's, I mean, it sounds obvious when you think about it, but a lot of people don't actually really acknowledge that having that innate power advantage. I mean, Alex Pereira, I know we touched on him earlier, is probably the most extreme example of that. The guy can walk backwards and land a left hook and knock you down.
True.
It can, you know, it's a thing where you can be so technically outgunned and outmatched, and it won't matter anyway. And that goes for punch power and submissions. And the reason that sort of train of thought comes to mind is because I'm on the sort of home stretch of that Volkanovski documentary I'm working on, you know, pretty much nearly done with it now. And I was doing the whole chapter when Volkanovski fought Ortega. And for all of his faults technically that Brian has, that submission game he has is just, it can win you a fight out of nowhere, and you know it can even nearly win you a belt. And unless your name is Alexander Volkanovski, I don't think anyone would have got that out of that mounted guillotine Brian had him in that night. And I almost think it's just a factor that people forget about. It's being opportunistic and combining that with an innate power or technical ability on the submission front. And Ricky Simone unequivocally has that in his hands. He's just got that sort of, I almost want to call it like an orc build, you know? Short, 100%. Stubby.
Josh Emmett build.
Josh Emmett build, and very, very dangerous. And of course, that is a man who probably personifies that to a T. But yeah, very impressed. And that really, maybe not ranking wise, but name value wise and skill set wise, springboards him right back into contention for that top 15, despite being on a sort of pretty poor run before last night. So I don't know where he goes from here, but definitely on the up for sure.
He's definitely powerful, and you can obviously see that with his wrestling entries. That gives it away. You can see they're explosive. They cover distance. They can spring off that initial couple of meters super quick. His back's really big. If you have a big, strong back, you're likely going to be able to generate a lot of punching power. So that is all true. But also, I don't think it's as much the power as it is, like I said before, the placement. I think if Javid Bashrat is relatively bladed and his eyes are locked on the target and he sees that punch coming and it comes square on his face, I think he eats that. He's young, he's fresh, he's not been in a lot of wars. I think he eats that. I don't think it was the power of the shot, although it was incredibly powerful. More so the fact that he didn't see the punch, and also the precision was pinpoint, like I said, on the chin. If he's seeing that square on, boom, I think he's eating that. But that's what it always comes down to, getting the punch that they don't see. And that's why sometimes you don't always see a lot of the highest level guys get put out cold, is because they're so attentive. Their vision's so good. They're so dialed in. And obviously they're making a lot less mistakes, which kind of circles me over to the boxing, which obviously we had on last night. And you talk we talk about punching, we talk about power, we talk about being there 100%. I think that's exactly what you saw in the main event between Beterbiev and Bivol.
Great fight.
So few mistakes by either guy, you know, over such a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the highest level, isn't it? It's the highest precipice of the sport. Probably the two right now. And again, I don't want to, you know, jump the gun or say too much, because I'm not going to claim to be some sort of boxing expert when I am far from it. But they are two of the most technically gifted and skilled fighters, not just in the division, but really just the entire sport. They are just phenomenal. And I thought it was close. I had Bivol up maybe 1 or 2 rounds, but it was pretty back and forth. He had a sort of tough first few rounds where he couldn't really get going, and he was kind of just getting outpointed. It almost felt like the fight was slipping away from him. But
sure,
I guess that's what the greats do. They rally back and they fight and they win. I mean, there were people who were debating the decision, but I don't think there's anything to get mad about when a fight's that close. That's just the reality of it. They're two, as you said, very, very highly skilled guys. So the fight is always going to be one with very few mistakes, and one that is always going to be close when the scorecards are red.
I think the thing for Beterbiev, there must be a reason to this. I don't believe that there wouldn't be. But you look at the first fight where it was very close. He got his hand raised, but there was a bit of controversy because Bivol was defending a lot of the shots, right? A lot of it was on the guard. A lot of it was on the forearms, the elbows, things like that. He did a good job defensively for the most part, not eating big shots. Beterbiev at the start of the fight was landing some nasty, and I mean nasty shots to the body. He's just got a longer torso, Bivol, and where he sort of guards up, there's a bit more space. If you look at Beterbiev, he's super compact. He's got quite a short torso. There wasn't, and just his stance as well. He didn't have a lot of gaps to rip to the body, right? Even though Bivol did manage to land. And I just think Beterbiev got away from that. And Bivol looked like he was sort of slowing down to the middle portion of that fight. And I really think if Beterbiev just invested in the body a bit more earlier, he could have at least brought the pace of Bivol down just a touch, had more of a stationary target, and then he would have been able to just get to work as he was, because that man is a monster. Beterbiev, that is. He's just a stoic beast. He eats every shot. He sees every shot. He just marches forward and he's just unloading heavy artillery. And the one thing that impressed me so much, Bivol's footwork and the way that he just exits the pocket and he's on the back foot retreating, and then boom, he exits,
just finds the space,
spun round, and then he's landed a 4-piece. And I'm not going to lie, I don't want to be that guy. I'm becoming that guy pretty quickly. I flip over from Beterbiev and Bivol, and then I put on, I don't know what the fella was that pushed Austin
Oh my God, yeah. I did the exact same thing as well. I switched it over and I just watched that. I was like, oh my Christ.
Mate. And listen, let me be real. Like, congrats to Austin. UFC debut, few days notice, like seriously impressive, right?
Yeah, he did very good.
So good conditioning, good performance, got a finish, got a little viral moment, everything went perfect. Shout out to him, all the props in the world. But there is just something very, very stark about flipping over from Bivol Beterbiev and then putting that on and seeing the striking exchanges. It was a tough watch at times. I'll be real. Yeah. I'm going to be critical.
Very much so. Yeah, that's a good. I feel like
I was watching Haggerty on the weekend, mate.
Oh, so was I. Yeah, technically gifted. And the only reason I say that's a good place to wrap it up is because my camera, I think, is just overheated. So I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. And I know you are short on time. So this has been a slightly shortened episode of the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 91, I do believe. And we will see you next Sunday. Have a good one.